Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of June 10th. And it really brings me a lot of pleasure to bring on a guy I've known for quite a few years now. He's a pal. We've had our differences, and we've certainly worked together certainly for the last 10 years or so. The one and only Michael Harrington. Good morning to you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning.
Afternoon.
To you as well.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Michael is the co-chair of Network 49, which is a political organization here in the 49th Ward that does a lot of good work. And one of the things that we've reported on regularly, and Michael's been on the show about, is the consent decree with the Chicago Police Department. So we're going to hear an update on what's going on with that and with the meetings before a judge, et cetera, et cetera. But first, Mike, tell us what a consent decree is and what is the specific consent decree that we're dealing with here today.
Okay, absolutely. It's the U.S. Federal Court consent decree, which is a document that required the city of Chicago and the Chicago Police Department to come to the table to address longstanding issues of racist policing in Chicago, policies and practices by the Chicago Police Department for decades. Our organization, Network 49, joined with a dozen other community groups about 7 years ago to petition the federal court to impose a consent decree on Chicago's police department. 2 years later, 5 years ago, the federal court, the U.S. Justice Department, did bring suit against the city of Chicago and its police department and forced an agreement where the city of Chicago, Chicago Police Department, and also joined by the Illinois Attorney General, they all agreed to work on improvements in the Chicago Police Department. It's a court order. Network 49 is one of a dozen community groups that are empowered and authorized to also provide input and oversight information to the federal court about what's happening with the Chicago Police Department's compliance. There's several hundred directives that the police department is required to work on to improvements, and everything from recruitment to supervision to training to evaluation to discipline to officer wellness. The police department in Chicago actually has only accomplished less than 5% of what was laid out in the consent decree. It's been 5 years now, and they got an extension for court supervision of the police department for another 4 years. So Network 49 and these other groups have been paying attention to what's happening in policing. And last week, we went to federal court and testified about our assessment of police training in Chicago.
What I've got here is the CPD, Chicago Police Department consent decree hearing statement to U.S. Federal Court Judge Rebecca Palomire. And you know, as a member of Network 49 and on the steering committee, I got the alert that you had put this together and you had written this letter to the judge. How did the judge respond? First of all, what was in this letter? It was, it had a long list of many things, some of which you've mentioned, but what was her response?
Well, the judge, with several people around Chicago, a couple dozen people were giving testimony. This was actual Zoom court testimony. What you got was a document of my presentation. And the judge thanked us for sharing this. She's going to be considering over the summer all of the issues that we've raised. And there's going to be another hearing in September where she responds to the issues. And the main issue that we raised was about training. And there's some context that most people need to think about when you think about Chicago policing and training. Firstly, training is considered to be wonderful. We always talk about training as a belief that police training is going to solve the problems, that it's a foundation in professional policing. But what we discovered when our use of force community working group members went to the police academy, and we spent several days sitting in classes interviewing the police trainers on the side and talking to police officers, we found a lot of problems that basically we discovered that with the use of force training and CPD, which is very important, the training undermines its own policy and encourages the problematic culture that led to the consent decree. Officers attend training because they're required and paid. However, attention is where many fail. We learned that CPD does not devote enough time to training. There are too few quality instructors and too many students per instructor. Exhausted officers fell asleep in class because they worked the night before. Officers showed strong resistance to several important issues in the training. The context is that we need to realize that Chicago already has a $2 billion budget for the police department and spent another $100 million to build a new police training facility. And more millions of dollars are thrown at the problem every year. Millions for lawyers to defend CPD against lawsuits and to compensate mostly Black and brown victims of police abuse and violence. Millions more fuel the work of several related agencies that oversee the police department: the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, the Chicago Police Board, the new Community Commission for Public Safety Accountability, the Office of Inspector General, and the federal court's own monitor, which is a so far $10 million expense. We're paying for a lot of oversight. We're paying millions for training, but the training is really poor. When we consider the failed training, we have to think about how that impacts on regular citizens in Chicago and even the police officers. The use of force training is super important. We saw, for instance, officers taught on how to use their gun and when to use their gun. But the problem is there's a repeated theme in training that an officer's first priority is to go home at the end of the day because their lives are seen as worth more than community member lives. It's an us versus them mentality that actually teaches police to fear us. So in training, we saw officers jump to reach for their gun when they were uncertain about the situation. We saw officers pull their gun when they're not supposed to because of the mentality of not respecting anybody out there. All of us, black, white, brown, green, blue. It's the officers who were trained to fear the rest of us.
Mike, you talked early on about the police not really wanting to come to the table and the resistance to the training and certainly to the consent decree. What was it? Solid resistance? Is it across the board? Are there any areas that the police department were more cooperative with and willing to make changes, or is it a pretty solid resistance kind of a stance?
It's a strong resistance. We've been working with the police department, these community groups in this coalition. The police, because the consent decree required them to meet with community groups, and so they've been meeting with us, but they haven't agreed with us. So for 4 years, we've already been talking to them about policy changes, and on these training issues, we had several dozen concerns. We met with the police department brass, their research department, their policy department, all the police department officials. We met with them a month ago. We spent about an hour and a half talking about the issues raised in our report. They said, that's interesting. Oh, that looks good. Oh, thank you very much for doing this work. They're always very nice. And there's been no follow-up. We want to find out, are they going to make the changes? Are they even going to consider the issues we raised? Are they going to come back with an alternative to what we suggested? We say A, we want to hear them respond to A and B, and so on and so forth. We're not having that. And we're hoping that with the new mayor, there will be a different mindset in the police department, to actually be listened to and be accountable to the residents.
What's your take on the new mayor and where he might go? And I mean, there's a lot of up in the air around who's going to be the new commander and or superintendent. And we're all hopeful. We like our new mayor. A lot of people, a lot of boots on the ground turned into great success. And what is your take about how you think he will be in appointing a new superintendent.
Superintendent Brandon Johnson, Chicago's new mayor. He's only been in office like 4 weeks. Our organization worked hard to help elect him, and we're very proud. And we carried this ward for Brandon Johnson.
73%.
Right. There were many different candidates, but at the end of the day, we said he's got the credentials and has the spirit and has the proposals, the track record and the proposals that make sense for us. We're optimistic that what he's going to do is understand that all of Chicago can be served. There's enough, his theme is that there's enough money, there's enough resources to help everybody, rather than ignore the decades of disinvestment that have happened on the south and west side of Chicago, that all neighborhoods deserve policing, they deserve constitutional policing, they deserve fair policing, and responsive, non-racist policing. So I think Brandon Johnson is going to be pushing that. The new community commission is going to be selecting candidates for him in July. He'll have 3 candidates to review and decide which one is the one that's best to be Chicago's new police superintendent. Brandon Johnson's going to be giving them a charge to actually be responsive and accountable. We have a huge amount of money spent every year, millions, to repair and compensate victims of police violence. I believe that's going to be turned around quickly with the appointment of a better superintendent that's going to lay down the law, require officers to follow their own guidelines and their own policies, which unfortunately have been ignored too long. And that's why we have a U.S. federal court consent decree monitoring and overseeing the Chicago Police Department.
Michael Harrington, you mentioned that we are part of a larger group working, putting together this use of force community working group. Who else is on that besides Network 49? What other groups around the city?
Network 49, Chicago, ACLU, Black Lives Matter, Designs for Change organization that's focused on handicapped people. The Illinois Attorney General is participating in this. The Brighton Park Neighbors organization is participating in this. The West Side NAACP is a member of our coalition as well. So it's a broad base of interracial groups, mostly civic-oriented organizations and communities around Chicago.
Before we close out, and this is something we will stay abreast of as it goes on, what's your sense of what we do here and this consent decree and how it gets handled and consent decrees around the country? Is it a meaningful vehicle to bring about significant change?
Yeah, this is. In fact, there's a couple dozen police consent decrees in effect around the nation. And Los Angeles consent decree is a very, very progressive one. But ours is even more because it carves out a role for citizen input. We talk directly to the federal court judge, and the federal court judge then is going to make rulings on what the Chicago Police Department needs to do. It's a long, slow process. It's a legal process, and we're now 5 years into it. But it really has the potential to make great change, and we're excited about new Judge Pallmeyer, who is overseeing the case, as we are excited about our new mayor, Brandon Johnson.
We also have a new thing that we just had our first election for, which were police oversight committees. Now, that's a separate thing from the consent decree, but also something geared toward community control of police.
Right. District councils are now in effect across the city. There are the 20-some police districts. There's a district council of 3 elected residents from each police district sit on the district council, which is to take input from residents about what public safety and policing in their neighborhood looks like. Here in the Rogers Park community, ours is the 24th Police District Council. Those 3 council members meet with our local police district commander to work on improvements in public safety and address problems with policing by officers in this district. So they are Evite Jones and Veronica Areola and Marilyn Pagan Banks are our 3 representatives who are meeting with the 24th District leadership.
Well, we hope it goes well. As much as I've had run-ins with the police over the year, I've also had some wonderful experiences. I know there are good people and not so good people on the police force, but the police are part of the community, and they need to serve the community and not oppose the community.
And their
So,
neighbors and their residents in Chicago. So we really need to be working together.
can I take this opportunity to shift a little bit and
Sure.
let's talk a little bit about Gay Pride Month?
Ah,
Um,
Pride Month.
and I know you're an advocate for the rights of LGBT people, and probably can give us some information about how you see it in the country at a time when the right wing is really hitting us heavy.
The right wing is going full stop on trying on their agenda, which is spend no money, care about nobody else but themselves. As a gay father, raised my two kids here in Rogers Park, I'm very happy to be out. I'm happy that we have a recognized Pride Month. It gives support to the many different LGBTQ people in this city, in this nation, in this world who have been oppressed for too long. I think it's important to recognize and celebrate Pride because there's a lot about what we do as neighbors, as relatives, as members of families to uplift, improve, and enrich our communities. I'm happy to have made contributions to my community wherever I've lived as a gay man. I've been out since many years, and my kids.
Ever since I've known you.
Both of my kids are working and educated and doing fine. The funniest, wildest thing about this Florida right wing stuff is about no the anti-drag and don't say gay and don't educate. This is ridiculous. Guns are more lethal than drag queens. Education is more productive than ignorance. I'm happy to celebrate Pride.
It's good. I celebrate it too. I am the proud father of two wonderful kids who are gay, and I'm the grandfather to two kids who, one of each of my kids has a kid, and there's a lot to do around this. I thought we were really moving forward. That we advanced the gay marriage. A lot of people were quick to go over to supporting LGBT stuff because most people in the country have a friend, a relative, a neighbor who's gay. And I thought we really had made some really serious strides, but apparently pretty much the Christian right wing and their influence, they have decided to attack transgender people big time. The whole drag thing, which you mentioned, we did have a victory, I think, in Tennessee where that drag thing was unconstitutional. Let's have some hope for the judicial system and the people in Florida and a lot of other states that can really. I talk to people from Florida and they're crazy about their governor. He's just I don't understand it.
DeSantis. Well, it's about why I'm part of Network 49 is to encourage voter education and voter participation. That really is the solution to a lot of the, the right wing people are a small minority, but they're a loud voice. The rest of us are the majority, and we need to raise our voices in action and participation.
How do people get a hold and find out about Network 49? I know we have a Facebook site.
And our website is Network 49. Network 49. It's www.network49.net, N-E-T, not O-R-G, .net. But they could also write or call me, Michael Harrington. My number is 773-971-1215 if you're interested in Network 49, or you can email me at michaelharrington123@gmail.com. Be happy to
I hope you're inundated with calls and emails.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much for welcoming me.
And thanks for coming on the show. It's always good. And I will be seeing you pretty soon. We have another steering committee meeting coming up. Okay, brother. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.